Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Remember, keep up with all of these stories at Tarpley.net, Tarpley.net. Also, get yourself a copy of Surviving the Cataclysm, your guide to the worst financial crisis in human history, and you will be able to do this analysis yourself, quite frankly, because that's the purpose of that book. The question, therefore, is, given the maintenance, and this has not been touched, the cancerous mass of $1.5 quadrillion of kited, bankrupt derivatives. This inherently means the world economy is bankrupt. The question is really, who goes first? Who will go into bankruptcy, panic, collapse, insolvency, and chaos? And naturally, the Anglo-Americans propose that the others go in first, the continental Europeans, the Japanese, the Chinese, and everybody else. And these sentiments are reciprocated. For the last 6 or 7 months, it's the Anglo-Americans who have been on the attacking Europe, essentially through forces of speculation, hedge funds, using credit default swaps, targeting Germany in particular because the Germans have dared to fight back. The German ban on naked credit default swaps, the German bans on other forms of naked shorting are providing, to some degree, a kind of defense from attacks inside of Germany, but they also indicate a willingness to fight, to strike back, not simply to roll over and let the Anglo-Americans run wild, which has had a political deterrent effect on other things the Anglo-Americans might have done. So this is why Soros is so interested in attacking Germany. Blame Germany for the Depression. Yeah, the panic started in New York then in London in 2007. It started with Countrywide Bank with a panic run there in August of 2007, and then we had a panic run on Northern Rock in October of 2007, and that's the beginning of the crisis. So don't blame Germany. And of course, Soros knows that he himself is a protagonist of these forces of chaos. Therefore, the thesis of derivatives being the heart of this matter. This week we get this interesting scandal about the shenanigans, the nefarious activities of helicopter Ben Bernanke and TurboTax tax cheat Geithner when Geithner was at the head of the flagship center of power, the New York Fed branch, and Bernanke, of course, presiding on the Board of Governors, a lesser post, really, in Washington, D.C., and it has to do with when Bear Stearns blew up, right? When Bear Stearns went bankrupt in March of 2008, March 15th, the Ides of March, Bear Stearns blew. And at that point, the New York Fed created the first of at least two that I know of, and maybe more, of these shadow companies called Maiden Lane. This was Maiden Lane 1. Maiden Lane is a street. It's more like an alleyway that goes by the New York Fed branch down there in Lower Manhattan. And the purpose of Maiden Lane was to buy up toxic assets, and that's what they did. And the beneficiaries of this, of course, are Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan Chase, because that's who was assigned to absorb the bankrupt carcass, the smoking wreck of derivatives destroyed Bear Stearns, and they needed all kinds of financial backup. So this was a part of it, to unload some of the toxic assets of Bear Stearns onto the U.S. taxpayer, of course. And what were these assets? Well, if you listen to the interviews, they were two kinds of derivatives. Derivatives caused the crisis, not subprime mortgages, but bets from afar on subprime mortgages, if at all. And again, when you buy a collateralized debt obligation, you're not buying a subprime mortgage. When you put $2 on the nose of your favorite horse at the track, you're not buying a piece of the horse. You're buying a bet, and that is what it is. So the bets were collateralized debt obligations and credit default swaps. Surprise, surprise. CDOs and swaps, credit derivatives, were the main toxic paper unloaded by Bear Stearns on the U.S. taxpayer. And, of course, this was junk. This was toxic. These were bankrupt derivatives. But, of course, the obsession of the Anglo-American ruling class is that these represent economic value. They do not. They represent the negative economic value. They are the Rasputnik, once again, right? The Little Abner cartoon strip, there was this currency called the Rasputnik. It had negative value. Why? Because you had to pay some carters, some garbage men to come and take it away because it was a public nuisance. Similarly with derivatives, the answer to derivatives in general is delete, shred, cancel, abrogate, destroy, burn. Burn and, as Scholl said at one point a couple of years ago in the crisis, you've got to blow them up, burn them out, and get rid of them. In other words, the incineration of derivatives, naturally with environmental criteria respected, is the essential point. So that's Maiden Lane. Now, the scandal, of course, is that Geithner and Bernanke lied. And the way they lied was that they were in hearings several months after the March bankruptcy of Bear Stearns, and they said those are investment-grade paper. Well, they were investment-grade paper back in La La Land on the Friday preceding the bankruptcy of the Bear Stearns investment hedge fund operation. Remember, Bear Stearns stock went from whatever it was down to $2 a share. And you should have seen the screams on the Yahoo message board for Bear Stearns. They couldn't believe it. Is there a typo? Is there a zero missing? No. The real value, of course, the real value of Bear Stearns was negative. And nevertheless, what we've caught is Bernanke and Geithner lying. Well, it's obviously a good reason. Audit the Fed. But don't just audit the Fed. Audit those component branches, in particular, more than any other, the New York Fed, because that is the cesspool. Those are the Augean stables of all the crimes of Wall Street going back so many decades. Do a long, long historical audit on that. But then, of course, Geithner and Bernanke have to be impeached. They lied. They steal money. They're doing these terrible things, right? Where is Obama? Is he asleep? What happened to Hope and Change? All right, so you get the idea. This is the one of the scandals that has emerged this week. Now, the G20 met last weekend, and of course, the imperative for them was do something against derivatives, do something against hedge funds, encourage individual countries to pass Tobin taxes, Wall Street sales taxes, Robin Hood taxes, securities transfer taxes, whatever they are, taxes on financial speculation. Didn't do any of that. And of course, the question then of large-scale infrastructure projects, international ones, to lead the world out of the Depression. Things like the Nord Stream pipeline. There's a good example, right, from Russia to Germany with everybody in Europe taking part. That's about $10 billion there. If you had 100 such projects, you'd lift the world out of a world economic depression. And the sum is not that large, right? You say, well, that would be, $100 billion. It would be 10 times that, right? It would be $1 trillion. Yeah, fine. That's $1 trillion compared to 1,500 trillion of derivatives. So they struck out, but nevertheless, they did say, cut your deficit by 1/2 by 2013. We'll be back to point out the insanity of that one in just a second.